Welcome back. Our procedure for the Q&A here is simply to do our best to answer any questions that you might have, if we know an answer, or do our best to struggle with one. It can be the topics that are in the program or anything. Your questions can be directed to the panel in general or to any speaker in specific. All you need to do is come on up to that microphone, say your question, and we'll go forward from there. Who's the first? Come on up. No questions? Good. Okay. Great time.
You're out there. We know that. Here he comes. All right.
One question in terms of what you're doing, what the program said. It was on a different time zone. It said panel discussion, 3 ways the world could end. Aliens, asteroids, and AI. What happened to that?
My answer to that is I have no idea.
Don't believe what you read.
I can contribute to the AI part of that, but I won't. So 2 questions, and I'll let anybody deal with this, although I think I had specific individual I thought of. One is for people who have repeat experiences. Are those still continuing?
There you go. Talk
For
loud.
those who have repeat experiences, are those continuing, or is it stopped at some point? And the other question I had, which is probably Peter knows more about this, do people who encounter repeat experiences typically start at a very young age, as we've seen with some of the people here?
Yeah, so basically,
My experience
go ahead,
is,
Peter.
yes, they are. It almost always begins in early childhood and follows individuals throughout a good part of their lives. Women who have these experiences have them usually up until menopause. And then, for whatever reason, the individual is of less interest to the entities. Again, even after more than 40 years with abduction as my specialty, the best I can do is say I don't know about so many of the dynamics. What I think I can say, especially after probably about half of my 35-year friendship with Bud Hopkins as his assistant, is there is one segment of the UFO phenomena that encompasses intelligences possessing high technology, traveling in hard metal machines, who come and go from wherever they come from with impunity. And when abduction research began in the later 1970s in earnest, the euphemism, they're experimenting, I think it was just the best phrase we could come up with. I think what's really going on is there's no experimenting going on per se. There is a program that is being followed and fulfilled that we can only make our guesses at as to why those particular entities are behaving the way they are. But I think it's leading to something. And I guess we'll either find out or not. Anyone else want to comment on that, please?
I think Peter pretty much covered it. Even people who have an experience later in life who didn't realize they had other experiences usually find that to be a trigger event. And the more they look back into it, they start realizing that this has been ongoing for a lot longer. Some of the other weird things in their life that they kind of pushed aside or put in a little folder in the back of their brain. they come to the realization that it has been happening since a much younger age.
All I'm going to say is ditto.
Anybody else have a question? Come on up to the mic. Come on, you have to come up to the mic. That's the prerequisite.
Hello, and thank you all for everything you shared this weekend. My question to you, to each of you, and it may be applicable or it may not, how have you, if you have a traditional religious belief system, how have you reconciled your experiences with that belief system?
Interesting. Anybody?
Sure.
Anyone?
The question doesn't really apply directly to the studies that I do, but I couldn't really do the studies I do if I didn't try to maintain an open mind about the information. When I was a student, my science teachers, the first concept they taught me was, they said that the role of a researcher, when you're faced with a problem that might have many different answers, is one at a time to sincerely entertain each of those answers, starting with the preconceptions of the solution, and then follow where those preconceptions lead. And if they lead you to what looks like a contradiction, the researcher's job is to ask themselves, what would have to change in my own preconceptions in order to resolve the obstacle? And then follow that through. And that when you get to the end of that process, it's under normal circumstances, you end up with one of those solutions where all of the apparent difficulties that surround the question evaporate, and you know that that answer is probably the right answer. And so it doesn't really have bearing on my belief systems. I'm trying to learn from the material that's presented. I'm in the process of forming a belief system.
All right, as far as it applies to my belief systems, it doesn't contradict anything. My outlook is mainly as a scientist. So for me, it's collecting, collating the data, and then trying to interpret what I've accumulated. But as far as a personal belief system, it has no impact.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed a gentleman who had, a conservative, religious background, and he had a UFO experience, and something he couldn't explain. So it changed his whole belief system, and it challenged his whole ways of thinking that way. And more or less like, why a lot of people were like, well, if they knew, or the government said that, disclosure was out there and we're not alone, would public go into panic? I mean, I don't know, yes or no. I mean, I think we've gone through enough with COVID and all this I think as a species, we can handle some stuff. But with something like that, so profound as that, sure, it's going to rock your belief system. But the whole thing is, I think, it's why. What's the agenda? That's the question. It's why are we getting these little glimpses, and then what is the parts of the whole, if that makes any sense. So it's fascinating to me. But having this gentleman interviewed, and he was it just rocked his whole world. And so much so that he was going to retire. He was going to go fishing, and his name Wally Wagner. And he was going to go fishing, go bass fishing. He said after he had this experience, he went on a whole new path and started writing books about this experience. So it was another calling for him, So you could look at it that way. He had his own religious experience, but in a whole different way.
That's a great point. My experience is that people do their best once confronted with a completely life-changing experience in the paranormal, or anything from a memorable UFO sighting to face-to-face to being taken. Within the matrix of their existing belief system, it can completely upset it, and you have a result right here. Or they'll codify it to fall into line with everything that they have believed. The best example I can give is that about 15 years ago, I did a series of on-stage debates in New Mexico with several colleagues who happened to follow a fundamentalist Christian path, and more power to them. But their pre-existing belief system absolutely governed every aspect of what we're talking about. They liked me in that they knew, although I was the opposing point of view on a certain level, I was always respectful, we were friendly, we agreed to disagree. But for example, I put forward a question, and this is with old Hubble telescope technology. NASA has tracked innumerable objects coming in from deep space. They filmed them. They come in like an anomalous, bit of space junk, or
Comet or a-
yeah, and then they'll make a right turn and just continue on a new trajectory. That's not natural. And their response would be, well, first of all, the given is that all this alleged flying saucer and UFO sightings, it's all satanic. These are minions of the devil and Satan, and they're smart, and their whole goal is to lead us away from the true teachings of Jesus. And then it would be another very specific question about something that had been documented in the world of UFO studies, and it's actually at one point it was, Satan watches the same television programs we do. And anything can be made to look a certain way for disbelievers who are, loose cannons on the path to the true faith. Who am I to say definitively that they're wrong and I'm right? However, my belief is that they're doing their best to not deal with what's going on, because in their mind somehow it challenges their set beliefs. And that's something they struggle with.
I think it's been covered pretty well so far. So personally, I don't believe in organized religion. There's too many rules, you shouldn't be told what you want to believe and then be expected to compare it against experience. You have a belief system versus something you've witnessed. I think closer along the lines that there might be something bigger. This all came and happened from somewhere, this whole collective consciousness, but I don't see that it needs to argue each other or disrupt it.
May I add to this? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I would just like to add that I have a very fundamentalist background. Those of you who came to my program are probably a little surprised to hear that. I grew up in the South in a Baptist church, and so it became very important to me that we begin to look at how our institutions can change and open up to accept new information, because that's just exactly what they're talking about. If you have your beliefs are frozen, you need to be able to expand them to accept information that might seem contradictory, but maybe there is a way that you can begin to integrate these. The book I wrote, You Are Love, Christianity Transformed, had to do with that. It had to be perceiving God not as a person, but as an energy. It had to be expanding upon the life of Jesus to be one where he was able to do things that are similar to what we've seen. So we see his life and interpret his life differently for the new world that we're going into, as opposed to the world that he came into and that he was written about. And also that many of the things that are talked about were things that our senses are expanded upon. So things like healing that he did. There is a way to bring that into that faith. My hope is that many of our religions are going to be able to expand, to accept this information. Otherwise, I feel that they're going to die. They won't be relevant. People will stop listening to them. And worse, not just that they are going to die, but that the people aren't going to have anything to hold on to. So this was really critical to me, to expand that awareness of what Christianity, that interpretation of what it can really mean. And it can incorporate everything that's happening now.
Step up to the mic.
I love this country, the United States of America, but in several ways I think we're ass backwards compared to the rest of the world. And I'm curious to hear your opinions on the disclosure, small steps that are being taken to disclose what exactly is going on out there. And my main question is, what other countries in the world do you think that are ahead of the United States in their methods of disclosure? And what are the first steps that you would like to see the U.S. government do in order to get in line with the rest of the world?
Okay, I've often said that anything shy of Klaatu and Gort landing on the National Mall doesn't really rise to the level of disclosure for me. That what we're seeing right now is the governments are owning up to the fact that vehicles are real, but they won't take it beyond that. They'll only say the vehicles are real. They won't say where they come from or who's operating them or things like that.
They say they don't know.
Well, they say they don't know. So if you think about it, the period of time from the Wright brothers' first flight until the invention of the space shuttle is about the same as the amount of time between the invention of the space shuttle and now. And during that second span of time, every technological device in the world that you know of went through exponential improvement. Now look at what happened with telephones. Except space technology, which really should have been at the head of the list, you would think. But the modern space capsules, the modern launch systems they have, haven't moved 2 feet off the mark of where they were in 1969. And that says to me that that exponential development happened in private, not in public. And it implies to me that the governments are now in possession of technology that looks an awful lot like the UFO technology, and that their motive in sort of half-heartedly embracing disclosure is to allow themselves to now operate those vehicles in public with impunity. That if those are ordinarily, if there are ordinary sightings of these vehicles around and nobody's upset by it anymore, then the governments are free to use them as however they like. And I think that's where disclosure's at right now.
You asked about which countries are more prevalent. Well, the first one on the list would be France. France has been very upfront in the Cometa report and all of that. The second one after that would be Brazil and Argentina, places like that in South America. Any other of the large countries are all under the, we'll call it the thumb of the bureaucracy that runs the rest of the world. Now, the United States is only one portion of that. This, not to get into conspiracy theories inside a conspiracy theory here in UFO land, but that technology is being utilized and usurped for other reasons other than to help us as people. It's all about this. And it always has been, always will be, until we can get it out of the hands of people that have control of it. Does that help you?
I'm good.
Thank you. Brazil has so many sightings.
Yeah.
Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, sort of related to that. This is my first session. This may have come up in other sessions, but what's generally happening with the number of sightings here over time in other countries? And maybe one of the reasons for asking the question, in 1980, I went to the meeting of the International Aeronautics Federation. I went to a couple of receptions. I met a KGB agent, translated the cosmonauts. He asked me, he thought I was a space press, I was computer press. He asked me, he gave me a little pin, as the Russians would do, an Olympic pin. He said, "What can you tell me about the Chinese space program, 1980? Think of what's happened in these 44 years. How do you think they would be reacting to what's happened? You know, you can talk about space, not a lot's happened. Imagine what's happened in the last few years. The countries in the moon, the countries here and there, all of these things, Starlink. How many Starlink satellites are there? Speculate. How do you think they would be reacting to all this activity in the last few years? I mean, it's just a, theoretical question, but, can you tell me what you think is happening in other countries, other than those you mentioned?
All of space is controlled by an international group, as you know. Okay, all the official, I should say. Each country also has their own secret programs that they use. Obviously, the Russians aren't going to be working with us to put up their spy satellites.
They asked me, but I didn't know. I could not foresee what the Chinese would be doing.
But my point being is, they work globally in the sense that, hey, we're sending up a launch, just so everybody else is aware of what's going on. They don't necessarily tell each other what they're putting up and why they're putting it up.
Satellite capture, whatever, but.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But right now, space is becoming privatized. And this is where the governments are starting to get afraid because they're losing control. And what do governments do when they lose control? They start to panic. They start to try and clamp down. Anybody in power doesn't give it up easily. Agreed?
Oh, agreed. But can any of you put yourself in a position of an alien? No, you can't. And how they would react?
How do you know?
Well,
To address the point just made, the privatized space programs are using the 1969 technology. So the governments, if we imagine, have proceeded with more advanced technology, haven't really given up anything. All they've given up is the old technology.
Anyway, thanks. I'm just interested in the internationalization of UFOs. So that's sort of the
Well,
question.
there is an international organization that, these groups all share information. Are you talking non-citizen?
Either way, it's not an area I followed.
Yeah, well, the governments share stuff internally that they don't tell the people about.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's just this goes back to Cold War, because they didn't want a Cold War set off by a UFO. It's like, hey, is this yours? Is this yours? We're painting this. Okay, so it's not yours, it's not ours, and they would just record it and log it type of thing. What they've got going on now is obviously they're using internet, and it's a little bit more organized in upper levels, but it's still not kept. It's still kept from the public, if that answers your question.
In a way, there's so much junk out there that I'm
Yeah.
sure it's harder to see, which is maybe to their benefit, harder to see an alien craft coming in.
When I had a chance to play at the White House as a jazz musician, and I played for Clinton in 1998, and Clinton's well known for saying, as soon as he got into the White House, he realized very quickly there was a government within a government. And he was one that was trying to get disclosure out there, and he was trying to do that, but shut it down. Even back in Nixon's days, Nixon was they wanted to put a documentary film together, and it was called UFOs, Past, Present, and Future. Robert Emenegger was a documentary filmmaker, and they wanted this disclosure to come out. There was this is one case that I would love to see if there's any footage out there, but it's supposed to be 600 feet of film of
Holloman Air Force Base.
Holloman, yep, he's got it. Holloman Air Force Base, a UFO landing, and it was basically in Close Encounters in that movie. It was basically that ending scene was supposed to be what happened at Holloman Air Force Base. But disclosure was happening, so they had this film and it was ready to go. But at the last minute, what happens? We can't find it. So, it's been going on for a long, long time.
I think it was in the earlier part of the Clinton administration that the Disney company decided to produce a documentary that I thought was extraordinary. First, Walt Disney is a major force in world culture. They are a very profitable corporation. They have captured the imagination of most of us as children. Disney is a word that emblemizes many things, but they are a powerhouse. The thing that set this documentary in a special place was that it opened with a statement by Michael Eisner, who at the time was head honcho at Disney. And there he is saying, this is real. We're going to be learning more about it. The story is happening now. It's basically waiting in the wings, and then a terrific documentary. It was shown on television once
One time.
and disappeared.
Maybe I have the videotape.
The fact that there are people who jammed that audio cassette in the video cassette in their player and recorded it, a lot of us have seen it. You can probably find it on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
You Google
Yeah.
Disney documentary, but it was deep sixed. It was vaporized as far as the official world went. My thought was, if Disney has taken the initiative to do this, it wasn't done without at least passive encouragement. They wouldn't have done it if they didn't believe that the Clinton administration was about to make a statement that would be paradigm shifting for the human race. Obviously, as Erica just pointed out, that not only did not happen, but it did not happen in spades. It's, every once in a while there's a tiny blip on the media horizon that can be interpreted in that manner. And in every single case, from the get-go, it's one way or the other been infused like some of those images on Mars.
What do you think about the current show? And I'm almost 80, my memory's not great. There's a show playing now, it's going to second season, about the alien. Somebody will shout out the name.
Ancient Aliens?
No, it's a current show, major network. Resident Alien, is that it? Well, yeah. We're coming back for a second.
That's a comedy.
It's a comedy.
Oh, I know it's a comedy, but it's clouding people's view.
Of what the alien, yeah, it's...
Anyway, you look at it two ways. But
I did want to say one thing, though. If you guys want to check it out, it's UFOs past, present, future. You can find it on YouTube. Rod Serling, he narrates the whole thing. And but supposedly, there's about 12 or 15 seconds of this UFO footage, this authentic footage that they got in there somehow of this thing coming down onto the tarmac. So check it out. It's pretty cool.
I'd like to start with Matt. I'd like to know your concerns about AI.
No, seriously, AI, okay, all I can think of is they just went from theoretical to now the Terminator is actually gonna fucking happen. No, seriously, AI is a dangerous, dangerous thing if it's left to its own devices. If that answers your question.
The only thing I think with AI too, with all of these, I really, it drives me nuts on like Instagram or Facebook. You see all these UFOs and they're all completely fake. I mean, you could see all these sites, you could clearly see that they're manufactured. So it really cloudies the water, from what we're trying to do.
And it does the same thing in politics too.
Oh yeah, totally. But the thing is, when we're looking at this and we're trying to find this, the truth, every once in a while you'll raise an eyebrow and say, that looks interesting. But I always like to go back to the old footage, the old photos from the 40s, 50s, analog, right, the photos that were taken with a Polaroid that you can't digitize. And that Patterson-Gimlin film back in 1967 of Bigfoot. Those guys just happened to be there at the right place at the right time. So a lot of what we do, I think, is you're in the right place at the right time, whether you like it or not,
Also, remember that the forces that be, we can't hear you. The forces that be in our government that are those who have always moved the chess pieces around behind the scenes and have a vested interest in keeping the original 1947 secrets secret, are partially driven by an institutional, not guilt as much as if we were to admit, we, the United States government, where the secret keeping began, make no mistake about it, in the summer of 1947, classic scenario, a president goes on major media, perhaps it's time with other leaders going on major media in their countries My fellow Armenians, it is my solemn duty to inform you that in coordination with other countries around the world, we have decided to announce that in fact, first world countries have been not being forthcoming. We are not alone. There are UFOs, there are intelligences. Who are these folks? Essentially, it started with a core of the most powerful men around Truman. It's a macho circle. There were no women involved. And sometimes when I say men, people think I'm mankind. At the time, it was just men who decided at this moment in 1947, we were, in many ways, what we wish we were now. We had helped make the world free from fascism. We were helping our enemies with this thing called the Marshall Program to rebuild their societies on constitutional basis. How much trouble have Germany and Japan given the world on the world front of conflict? None since then. It's a wonderful moment, but we were on the edge of another potential world conflagration. The new enemy had revealed itself, Stalinist communism, the Cold War, and the Cold War began, I think completely coincidentally, the summer of 1947 as well. And how do you make an announcement like that without saying, oh, it's touchy, but every single president since Harry Truman has been involved in the greatest cover-up in human history? That cuts both ways. And that core of presidents and their descendants, they're very touchy about their relatives being called liars. It's been so deeply institutionalized. Think of it as that grain of sand inside the pearl to cover it with, keep the irritation, has become a huge pearl. That is the birth of our national security state. It didn't have to do with trying to keep our nuclear secrets, although that's the mythology. It had to do with what crashed in the desert about 30 miles from then a small town called Roswell, New Mexico. And that encaustic covering, that thickness continues to build. It's going to take an extraordinary individual or team of individuals to have the courage, the support, the imagination to break that pattern.
Okay, I got one thing I want to ask. Can I get the opinion of the women on this? Because when it comes to, we got a lot of men here talking, and women are generally marginalized and minimalized when it comes to strong issues.
Or anything.
Or anything for that matter. What is your viewpoint? What is your viewpoint of how AI or this stuff can affect the world? Because you guys are the nurturers. You're the ones that bring the life into this world. How do you see what could potentially happen?
Start? I'll start since I'm on the end here. As a mother, it definitely terrifies me that it's making it even easier for the children to not think for themselves. Okay. As an artist and a writer, it also frustrates me that the AI isn't, doing my dishes and cleaning my house for me, and instead it's doing the stuff I want to be doing while I still have to tend to these other things. It's a scary, scary concept of, we are humans. We are here for a human experience, and why are they taking that away from us? I don't like it for myself, and I am frightened for the future generations if they cannot wake up to what is happening and push back against it. I hope that our children can be smart enough. I know my daughter is amazing with this stuff. She's incredibly intuitive, and I think she would be one of the people that could stand up and say, hey, this isn't right. If we're gonna allow this, let's find a better way, or let's do away with it. So I hope that is what is gonna happen, but I am scared.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for, is from that vantage point.
Well, I'd have to say ditto as a mom, as a writer, as an artist. I have to say that. But I think that my bigger concern is the fact that I really don't know enough about it. And I feel like so much of what happens with really important things happen out of sight. And I don't really have the access, nor have I, in honesty, pursued it, but if something has the potential that I sometimes hear, that if it is out of control, I don't know who I'm supposed to trust who's taken charge of all of that. I just don't have the faith that anybody right now has that handle on it, and that's the part that frightens me.
When I think of AI, I think about those robots that can go out and hunt people down and kill them.
Terminator.
Yeah, the Terminators, or those robot dogs that they can find you by heat seeking and then kill you. They shoot
Designed
you,
and
they
built
kill-
by
design-
Boston Dynamics, roughly about 40 miles from here.
I mean, when I first started hearing AI, artificial intelligence, and then that's where my mind went, to the robotics. And then there's the Project Bluebeam, where they flash pictures of Jesus in the clouds.
Hold it closer so you can hear.
So you got pictures of Jesus or Madonna or these other things floating around, and people are taking it as divine signs when it's not. It was created by the government with some machine projecting this light beam up into the sky. For me, that's AI, okay? And then last night when I was with my son and he was trying to help me fix my slide presentation, I'm old school. He goes, Mom, let me go on the computer and do AI for you. I went, oh no, hell no. I want to do this myself. I don't want somebody else taking it over for me.
So you're afraid of losing the power that you have of
That
your...
we're people, that we think for ourselves. That's what I'm afraid of.
It's a really
Because-
excellent observation, Catherine.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add that from the get-go, the Truman administration, after due consideration, Truman and his advisors, better known as that initial working group of Majestic 12, came to a decision that became policy under the Truman administration and ran from 47 until 1952 with the election of President Eisenhower, which was the most macho, reckless, arm muscle showing. It was simply shoot them down. The definitive work on that was written by a wonderful scholar named Frank Fascino Jr., and the book is called Shoot Them Down, and it documents this process. Now think how reckless that is on a certain level. Also, that the establishment that controls this information from the get-go is the military establishment fused with the intelligence establishment. They say to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To the military establishment of the Western world, everything that is potentially dangerous looks like a threat. And let's hypothetically say for a moment that they almost are coming here like anthropologists to observe us or to follow up on hundreds of thousands of years of observation, of genetic manipulation. I like to think sometimes we are the result of somebody's graduate experiment gone horribly wrong. But that it's mostly always seen within the matrix of every, how can I say?
Bluntly.
Yeah. All fear at its baseline is fear of the unknown. Everything from are they friendly to are my kids going to get hooked on drugs? Is this person going to continue to love me? Am I going to get cancer? Am I going to win the lottery? It's fear of the unknown, light or heavy. And perhaps if our attitude could be adjusted, things might move quicker. At the same time, if they really were evil or wanting to control us or some science fiction, nasty kind of aliens, my favorites being, of course, Mars Attacks, you can't get much nastier than that, we would probably all be walking around with little helmets staring straight ahead, working in the salt mines. Some say they've been in control from the get-go. They pull the strings with key individuals, within government, within society, and it's all an Indonesian shadow puppet kabuki play that we're kind of a part in. Travis Walton once said, and his opinion of what happened to him changed markedly over the decades. At first it was, bang, they shot me. And a lot of us feel that it wasn't intentional, that the craft may have been part android. It reacted rather than, some gray alien at the control panel. Most of us have now come to feel that what happened to Travis was not intentional, so to say, but that they stopped his heart and that they took him on board to restore it, basically let him go. Whatever the truth is, well, reality doesn't care what we believe. And so we're all kind of left with, I want to believe, or I fear this. There's only two forces in the world. We call them different things, but they come down to love and fear. And it's very difficult, indeed, it's a mark of real courage, I think, to be able to say, I'm going to take a deep breath and take a chance and give these entities an opportunity to present themselves or just to start to see them in non-confrontational terms. Why aren't they making themselves known? Why aren't they landing on the White House lawn, damn it? Well, remember what, sometimes science fiction is our only model. In The Day the Earth Stood Still, the craft lands, Klaatu gets out, takes out the president, for the President of the United States, bang, welcome to the United States of America. Yes. Maybe that's the problem.
You're up.
You've made me want to change my question a dozen times since I've been waiting up here. But mine's pretty quick. I've just not been aware the past few years about the thing that got me the most mystified when I see these programs on TV and they talk about how big the ship gets once the abductee gets inside. It's like,
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
Oh, they see the people who get abducted or experience something where they go into a ship, and then they see that the ship is actually much bigger than it's possible.
The TARDIS effect.
I don't know what it is, but I do not dream very much. But I have a recurring dream, the only one I ever have, that does that except in a house. I go into these houses, they all look similar. There's a water thing, and then there's more rooms. And how could this little cape have all these rooms? And I keep going into different rooms and I'm getting lost. I don't know if that's a thing. And does anybody else do that, have that? That's all I got.
Well, what you're describing is called the TARDIS effect. Do you know what the TARDIS is? Fan of Doctor Who? Yeah. Doctor Who? Yes. You know the police box, the blue police box that the doctor goes into? You open it up and it's, a 12-story building inside.
So I don't watch that.
Okay.
I'm not a fiction person, but go ahead.
But what you're describing is that, the TARDIS effect. And what you're dealing with in terms of these things, they alter dimensional space. So, what you're seeing visually outside versus what can be happening in their space and their control of that is like what I said, the TARDIS effect, because they have the localization control of where they are. So what is in our 3D space is different in their 4D, 5D, or wherever the hell they're from type of space. Does that help you?
And I think, and to exacerbate that point, there was a case in 1974 of a hunter in Wyoming, Carl Ligdon, I think his last name was, and he was elk hunter, and he's hunting and he sees these 5 elk in this particular, I can't remember what the name of the forest was, but it was in this particular, Medicine Bow area, the Medicine Bow National Forest. So he sees the 5 elk, he goes to shoot, and the bullet hits something, some kind of force, and just completely drops. And he sees He picks up the bullet, and it's like something hit it. And as he stands up, he sees this cube, translucent cube there, with his elk inside the cube. And he sees this guy that's up on the hill that comes down to him, and he told him his name was Ozo, and took him aboard this cube. Well, now, when he got in the cube, it became this huge thing inside. And it was and then it was just, the story is incredible if you get a chance to check this out. But he was taken to this planet, and they did a test on him and found out that he was sterile. And they brought him back. So, there's a lot more to it than that. But while he was on the ship, he saw his elk like in there, and it became huge. So it's going with that idea of entering this small space, and all of a sudden it's getting bigger.
The cube thing you talk about is called a tesseract.
It's on the Missing 411 documentary on Amazon.
Yes. David Politis.
Thank you, Don Robinson, United Press International. No, just kidding. Peter was nice enough to answer a question for me during a break, and my big question has been, as of late, just obviously the secrecy that the government has always had, long had, and all of a sudden, very recently, starting back with Harry Reid, there's been this push, odd change of pace for our country to all of a sudden release, or at least try to get information to the public. And that just really was peculiar to me. So I asked Peter, and I thought he had a great explanation on that. And I was wondering if you could just tell that to the group. And then just as a secondary, what's your thoughts on the whistleblowers that have come out, talking about David Grosh, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, and Alessandro, and, all the way even back to Bob Lazard. What do you think about them, believability, any possibility of disinformation, and are you guys aware of whistleblowers that have been maybe silenced or shamed out of even talking about it? But to start, if you could say a little bit about that, because I thought that was very good.
What you told him earlier.
I've been talking to so many people, I'm not exactly sure what I told you that you want me to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, coming back. How you doing? So, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, a few years ago, the United States government, thanks to a few senators, Harry Reid, starting the fact of starting that program, black program with secret information, money, and he was able to start getting some of the information out. And then Gillibrand from New York and Marco Rubio, Democrat and Republican, now have kind of taken that mantle and trying to get as much information out to the public, which is awesome. It's just a really amazing turn. And just wondering what your thoughts are for why that is, why that turn of events. And then again, just anything that you guys have on whistleblowers and, could anybody be doing disinformation or anybody being suppressed, something to that effect.
Thank you. Briefly restated, what we were talking about was we all are aware that the House of Representatives, certain individuals, elected officials, have begun a process which they hope will result in less secrecy, more openness, and ultimately acknowledgement of what we know and are not saying. Some of my friends and colleagues feel my attitude or my idea I'm about to express is naive and kind of wishy, but I point to two examples of elected officials who are deeply involved in this subject, who are classic political opposites. We have Marco Rubio of Florida, who is certainly a card-carrying conservative Republican, and we have one of my congressional representatives, Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, who is a progressive liberal. They have been working together for some time crafting legislation around this. I think it's fair to say, wherever you stand politically, our country is in real trouble. And instead of relying on one of the most important points of the Founding Fathers, there were a few Founding Mothers, was compromise is one of the highest forms of expression in a democracy. That started to go out the window, I think, in the early 90s. An instrumental figure was Vice President Dick Cheney, whose attitude that started to become part of the opposition idea was compromise is for losers. This is a winning game or losing game. It's not about finding middle ground, it's about crushing your opponent and demonizing them to a degree. That's very unhealthy for democracy. In Gillibrand and Rubio, we have two opposites who have come together to craft legislation that has the potential, one of the few things, to bring people on opposite sides of the aisle together. And I would bet that in the course of the months that they have worked together, and now it's several years, I think, 2 years maybe, that even maybe to their surprise, a friendship has developed there, and more of a mutual respect that we have our differences, but we have things we can agree on. And you know, you have your family and I have mine, and we have our friends, and we have things in common. It is my hope that ultimately an expression of disclosure that really gets out there might have the potential to bring us together, certainly to a better degree than we have right now. It's, you know, we'll see what happens. But that basically was the thought. I also want to ask very quickly, somebody up front, I don't have a program. What time are we scheduled to stop this and begin our raffle? I feel a little silly because I should have memorized it, but...
15 more minutes.
Okay, beautiful.
15.
Continue on.
So, whistleblowers, do you want to speak on that at all?
I think they're heroes in their own right, because it took guts for them to break the oath of not talking about these subjects, because it's part of their job, under the threat of their families being harmed, them being harmed. They still came forward. And look at the ones that are in exile. They're in other countries because they can't come back here. As soon as they come back here, they're going to be prosecuted. For what? Telling the truth? For telling us what's going on underneath our noses that we're not aware of because it's being hidden from us? I think they're heroes. And I think they deserve it. These guys, these people are risking death to come forward and talk. And when I was doing the research on the UFOs, I did a small section on, I had the same question. How many UFO researchers were being suicided or other? And I found out quite a few. When I started getting into page 7, and I'm writing down all the names and how they died.
Morris K. Jessup.
All these names. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then I got to the 2 that died in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, they were killed up in the White Mountains. They say it was an accident, but these guys were experienced campers. They knew how to run a propane heater in their tent, but they were going sky watching. All right, in the morning they find 2 dead bodies from carbon monoxide in the tent. But these men were experienced, in how to camp. They've done it before, and their wives would tell you that. So, yeah, it was scary for me. At one point, when a couple points when I was doing this research, I had to close the book and leave it alone for a couple of months because it was like, whoa, this is overwhelming. I have to digest this before I can move on. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people, like the ones who are first learning about this. It's too overwhelming because we start getting into the so many different areas. I started on UFO research and it took me down this path, took me down this path, took me down this path. It's confusing, but it's overwhelming to a lot of people, and that's why they don't talk about it.
I hear you. I had my house broken into, my samples taken. They tried to set the house on fire. A couple of weeks later, when that didn't work, a couple of guerrillas and a Ford LTD with G12 plates threatened me at gunpoint. So yeah, I kind of get it.
I know a guy who, he's a targeted individual. He got onto a website that he shouldn't have gotten onto. It was totally by accident. He saw stuff that he shouldn't have seen. Okay. Now they're talking to him through his television. They're controlling the television, shutting it on and off. They're getting into his cell phone. They're turning it on and off. They're recording his conversations, playing them back to him. So he got rid of all the electronics in his house. They do drive-bys. He lives on a hill going up. Now, what car is going 3 miles an hour up the hill to stare at you? No, it's the ones that are watching. And he can point them out and he says, yeah, that vehicle here, that vehicle there. And at first I thought, maybe it's a little, not as much as you think. Until one day when I was visiting him and I was getting ready to leave, I stopped my truck and a blacked out SUV pulled right up next to me and was staring at me. So I stared back and I went, what? You want to come talk to me? You know? But it's because of that, the targeted people, that I've also kept a low profile, I've just done this in quiet for 25 years. I didn't want anybody to really know what I was doing. I mean, I went through experiences where my computer was being hacked into. I'd click on some kind of a site where I'm trying to get information, and all of a sudden I'd get, you're not allowed to be here, you don't have permission, and then my computer would crash. I'd have to take it to my computer guy. My hardware's trash.
We told you to stay off those sites. Come on.
No. There was no boobies. But here I am. Because I was getting into, I'm trying to search through the Freedom of Information Acts, and I'm trying to get into the declassified stuff. And there were times where, yeah, it's readily available. It's a mess if you can sort it out. But then there's other sites I'd click on, and I must have crashed my computer like 6 times by getting on websites that I shouldn't have. And when I brought it to the computer guy, he opened it up, he did his thing, and then he goes and checks the registry edit. It was all coming from the government, the government, the government, the government. And it was like, oh crap, they're watching and they're listening. How do they even know about me? I'm nobody. I am nobody. I don't have a name, I don't have money, I don't have deep pockets. I'm nobody, so why are they paying attention?
Because you're not nobody. Because you have built one of the most important and complete databases of a state's UFO activity in history and documented it, and you should be congratulated
You have
for it.
something-
You are a person of interest to people that don't want this information to come out.
So it's your own damn fault.
I know.
Basically, it's
You make me cry.
not about the money and things like that.
No.
It's about your voice. That's what they're not looking for your information. They're
it's-
looking to silence
And
your
it's my
voice.
commitment. It's my commitment to it. Because when I was really getting into this
We
research,
got to get to questions.
Yeah, we'll probably get to
there
this
were
guy sometime next
flybys.
week. So.
I couldn't explain.
All right, you're up, buddy.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? All right, something for the panel and everyone else to think about. Given the tools that we have had for influence, on a physical side, for example, we've had religion, I say as a race, as a human race. We've had religion to kind of guide us with our spiritual, moral, our values. We've had genetic engineering. We were talking about alien abductions, that, especially with you, Matt, I mean, understanding the genetic manipulation, all this influence on the physical side. And on the spiritual side, we've also been influenced. We've had inspirations, we've had channelings, we've had non-physical influence, and we've also had physical influence as a race, or as a human race. These two entities, do you think they're collaborating together instead of focusing on evolution and technology and where we're here and talking about getting to a higher frequency, and here we are non-physical? Are they collaborating together? Yeah. And this is something you guys could talk about, maybe talk about next year at the next convention. Just a thought.
I think we should talk about, and not to go on about it, but that story, Stranger at the White House.
I'm going to sit down.
Go sit. Stranger at the White House, Valiant Thor. This guy shows up at the White House in 1952 during Eisenhower's presidency, and basically says he's a Venusian from Venus. And we will give you this technology, but we need to abduct human beings because our race is dying. And I always go back to this story because there is maybe a little grain of truth in this somehow. And and supposedly showed him the cell phone. He showed him all of these. Now this is 1952. 1947 was Roswell. Now you've got 1952. There's a great book called Stranger at the White House. Check it out.
Stranger at the White House?
At the Pentagon.
Oh, Stranger at the Pentagon. I was the stranger at the White House, sorry.
I have to jump in for a moment and say I have tremendous problems with this account. I think it's if not fictional, confabulation, and it may absolutely represent something that was going on behind the scenes. Just my personal take.
Well, given the amount of water that's dropped behind the Hoover Dam, we should have seen his parking space. Because that's where Valiant Thor supposedly landed, in the back of Lake Mead.
He was in New Jersey, too, the High Bridge incident, too. Yeah. Well, you guys are phenomenal. You know, I think we got to wrap it up, right? Or we got to wrap it up now?
Let's take a quick couple minutes to take a quick break. Last chance to get your raffle ticket. Yeah. Come back in. We'll start with the raffle, and then we can all get out of this very hot building.